Good evening. Welcome to the March 3rd, 2026 meeting of the Jericho Planning Commission. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Today is town meeting in Jericho. We were just talking about that there was steady activity at the polls all day. And there were a lot of questions over the course of the day about Jericho growth and Jericho planning and how great of a community Jericho is. And I always am reminded of how fortunate I feel to work with all of you here tonight. It's the beginning of new terms for a couple of us. Who do you remember whose terms just renewed? Sabina and Wendy. So thank you very much for continuing on working with our group here. For tonight's meeting, we will have time for public comment. We'll review our minutes from February 17th. We will spend most of our time this evening on two topics related to a package of zoning amendments that the Planning Commission has been discussing and considering for a few months now. The first topic is about the natural resources overlay, which is part of the current regulations, and some potential updates to the natural resources overlay based on new information, a new town plan, refined goals, and other work that we've been doing. And then we will be returning to a topic of planned unit development, also known as PUD, that we started at our last meeting and that Chris has done a lot of research and follow-up about and has some potential things to talk to us about for when planned unit development as a model of subdivision is best suited to meet the goals that we've set forth in the town plan. And then we'll hear from each other about reports, a report from Chris and any reports from each of us in our liaison roles, any other business, and then wrap up in planning for March 17th. Would anybody like to make or suggest changes to the agenda?
I don't have a change to the agenda, but I have a question about when, to bring this up. When do we reestablish our, rules of our meetings?
At our next meeting after this meeting.
Right.
Because traditionally we haven't had this meeting, so we've done it at the next one. And Chris and I talked about that. We're going to do it at the next one.
Are
Okay.
there new rules?
Well, we readopt our rules of procedure. We thought we would kind of take a minute to look at the year ahead and see where we are and where we're going. And we would elect a chair and a clerk.
Oh, okay.
So what I wanted to add to that is to discuss possibly changing the start time of the meeting.
Yes, so that would be.
So that would be at that meeting, or that would be maybe tonight under other business.
Yeah.
And wrap it
because-
up at the next one?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
that's okay with you?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay. Do we have any public comment for anybody on Zoom? There are no members of the public here with us in the room. And it doesn't look like there's anybody online.
Nobody's online.
Okay, so we'll assume no public comment. We will have time for public comment after each of our topics. Okay, so then I will move on to entertaining a motion to approve our minutes of February 17th.
I move that we approve the minutes of February 17th.
Thank you, Sabina. And a second?
Second.
Wendy, thank you. Any corrections or updates or edits to the minutes? Nope, good to go. All those in favor of approving the minutes of February 17th, please say yes.
Yes.
Any abstentions?
Yes.
Sarah Jane abstained. Any noes? No. Okay. Then I will hand it over to Chris.
Great.
Town planner.
Great. So our first agenda item, which Susan already mentioned, is continuing our discussion on enable housing. And looking what zoning can do beyond our village centers to make it easier to build housing And we're coupling this with work which we are working on with the Conservation Commission to look at forest cover and how that might be incorporated. More additional forest cover might be incorporated into our natural resources overlay. This is again just a recap of the charge that we've got from the select board in terms of what they've asked us to look at. Tonight's topic about PUDs is tangentially related to one of them with the incentivizing clusters of homes, because that's something we usually get out of our PUDs. And then not specified from the select board, but also ensuring that residential development that we're looking at outside the village centers is compatible with our goals for natural resources protection and making sure that they peacefully coexist. Also on the timeline, we are marching through. You can see where we are March 3rd, talking about the NRO recommendations, and then we'll continue our discussions on where and when PUDs they might want to be required. I also added on here, we had talked previously about a desire to do some additional outreach, maybe more than we usually do because of the nature of the changes that are included in this package. So I put that down for some time happening in April. So that is something if we can all be thinking about how to do that, there'll certainly be things that I will be doing, but I think as a commission, we might be able to think of some other things and maybe do some additional outreach that's maybe some things that we've done before, but maybe more than what we've done before too. All right, in terms of also I just wanted to say on outreach, Wendy and I think Sabina have both worked on some text for the Enable Housing initiative that we can post up on our website so we can build a robust website that really reflects all of the work that we've been working on. We've got a lot of really good background information that we've been looking at since August, September. So I think we should be able to build something really meaty that's on there. So if people have any questions, they can really get a full scope of what we've been talking about and the issues that we've been considering. Also, two other things on the schedule. This is why I have notes, so I don't forget these things. We will be circling back to housing incentives. I know we started that discussion at our last meeting. We really had a full agenda for this time. So as much as I wanted to put it on the agenda last time we were here so late, I don't want us to be here so late. So we'll be pushing that to the next meeting. Also next week, I'm going to be meeting with the Affordable Housing Committee at their meeting on March 10th. I'm really looking forward to that discussion. There might be some things that come out of that discussion for us to discuss here. So I'm thinking that our timeline might shift. I really want to stick to it as much as we can, but if it takes longer for us to do what we need to do, it's just going to take longer to do what we need to do. In terms of goals, this is what we've defined since we started our work. There are really no changes since our last meeting. Although I do want to highlight the one goal that's bolded on the screen right there relating to mapped resources. That was something that we had talked about earlier, and we are going to circle back to that later tonight when we're talking about the PUD ideas for what triggers PUDs. In terms of guidance, since we've defined since we started this work, there are really no changes since our last meeting. All right, so our first topic tonight is an update on the work of the Natural Resources Overlay Working Group. So that has been myself, Sabina, Susan, and Tom Barabal from the Conservation Commission. We're specifically going to be talking tonight about what forest blocks to add to the Natural Resources Overlay. So I think previous discussions, we've had some general discussions. Background information. There is going to be some background information tonight, but the real meat of what we're talking about tonight is we do have some very specific recommendations that we need feedback from the Planning Commission on. All right. Excuse me. So tonight we are going to review at a broader level the forest blocks and the ecosystem that they're part of. It's really interesting information. Sabina had suggested including it. And it was really fun doing the research to pull that together. It's really interesting seeing how we fit into this bigger picture. Then just a real quick overview of what our current natural resource overlay regulations are and forest block assessment. We've reviewed it before, so we should be able to go through those pretty quickly, just a refresher. Then we'll get into the working group recommendations for adding forest blocks to the natural resources overlay. Then we'll have our discussion and then just where we see us going for our next meeting. And then this is just a reminder, and I think we have done a really good job being aware of this balance of what we're trying to achieve in terms of really getting more housing, but also respecting the natural resources that we have, the things that people really like about Jericho that make it a special place, and really finding the right balance of both housing and natural resource protection in our rural areas. And that's exactly what we're trying to figure out as a planning commission. All right, so first, some big picture context and how our forests here in Jericho really relate to a larger ecosystem. So what you see up here on the screen here is the whole Northeast region of the United States, even going up into Canada. Our community is surrounded by one of the world's largest forests that experience 4 seasons, so temperate forests. So it's not tropical, it's not Arctic, it's a tropical forest. And this is where we have woods that stretch for miles without being unbroken by roads, houses, or development. And it really is one place in the world where we have this environment. It's really important to think about how to maintain large forest blocks where they remain within this area. There's only like 10% that are protected, and then another 25% that have some additional protection. So as on a whole, there's only about 35% that have some level of protection. Vermont is really critical as a hinge state. You can see it outlined in red. So just underneath Lake Champlain is so let me back it. So the yellow lines on here are how wildlife migrate through this area. So you can see just south of Lake Champlain where there's a migration path going from the Adirondacks into the Green Mountain chain. And Vermont is a hinge for that whole network.
Which
It's
is
really critical.
seasonal migration.
Yes. I'm looking to Sabina for information. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
How much of that is avian versus terrestrial? The migration.
Right, I don't know the percentages, how it breaks down.
I guess I asked if it was seasonal because it's not like they're all moving north or they're all moving south, but it's a constant
It's a
flow.
constant, you know,
more
but
or
a lot
less.
of the larger mammals have very large territory areas,
Yeah.
right? So like for a black bear, it's miles and miles and miles,
Yeah.
you know, so the back and forth is not necessarily like a migratory pattern, but it's a bridge. You
Yeah.
know, it's saying if your territory expands in this area, this is how you would get back and forth.
Right, okay.
So yeah, for the larger mammals, they have pretty extensive territories. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah,
And I mean, the birds are going obviously
yeah,
overhead, but a lot of this habitat is critical breeding territory for birds, so they're down in South and Central America right now. But their destination for breeding successfully is here and north of here. So it's pretty unique and pretty important.
And then what to think about our forests here in Jericho. We are outside of Burlington, which is it's the economic engine of the state, right? So we have different housing pressures here than there are in the rest of the state. And then we're in the foothills of the mountain range, so they're easier to develop than higher up on the mountain. So the forest resources that we have, you know, are a little more vulnerable than forest resources in the rest of the state. So that's something to keep in mind. When we are talking, so we're talking about adding forest blocks to the natural resource overlay as a protected resource. So here's just a real quick recap on that. The natural resources on our natural resources overlay, which is a zoning overlay, and what happens if you have a property and you go to develop it, and one of these resources is on your property, then you have to go through an additional review to make sure that those resources are being protected. The the map specifies resources as either primary or secondary resources. That implies different levels of importance and protection. This review prevents degradation of those resources. It helps protect what those existing resources are. So I mentioned that there were sort of like two sets of resources and two levels of protections. The protections for each of those resources are specified in the regulations, and they can be a range of what those are. So like for a vernal pool buffer area, part of that you can't build in at all. Some of that you would need conditional review. For something like what you see on here in blue, which is the high elevation forest, which is the only forest blocks that are on the maps now. If you're going to build in that, you have to have a conditional review. So it's not that you can't build in them. They're just additional things you need to look at if you're going to do it. Conditional review around not just that, but other resources. And then some of them, like the wildlife corridors, currently you just need to have the zoning administrator review for compliance with the regulations. I know I said it before, but if you can look up there now and just think about where those, if you can pick out where those blue areas are, because those are the existing high elevation forest blocks. I'm going to refer to them later and they'll show up again, but you can see where they are here. The light blue. Yeah. Yep. Thank you. And then here's another quick recap, because previously I think it might have been in October or November. Sabina had done a review of projects that had been reviewed through the Natural Resources Overlay. A number of these projects were also reviewed as PUDs. Most of them, not all of them. I think there were maybe two.
I think when I went back, it actually was.
They were all okay.
Yeah.
You can see here on the map that they're located throughout Jericho from the north all the way down to the south. What we found was having this review in place did not lead to any reduction in number of dwelling units that were being proposed. And it was successful in locating development away from the natural resources. So it's really doing what it needs to be doing. And then all of the projects achieved the goals of both of the reviews because it led to clustering of development, which is one of the goals of our PUDs, as well as protecting the natural resources.
You know, if there's been any projects not going forward?
Because of the NRO? I
No.
don't know of any. What is a real strength of the NRO is that there's flexibility in it. It's not, none of it says thou shalt not. And there are a few instances where you can't build on a vernal pool, or but it's really flexibility is built in for there to be problem solving and working with the Conservation Commission and the Development Review Board to get the best outcome. In terms of Jericho's forest blocks and the assessment that Arrowwood had done. So Arrowwood was a consultant that was brought on board by the Conservation Commission. This map shows Arrowwood's survey of all of the forest blocks in Jericho. So you can see that it's pretty extensive. And as I said before, the NRO only includes the high elevation forest blocks. So there's a lot more on here that's not in the NRO. Arrowwood ranked these blocks for ecological prioritization. There's a whole list of things that they looked at. The size of it, the amount of fragmentation, the mix of tree types. It was complicated work for the working group to kind of synthesize all that information, and what we're going to be sharing with you tonight in terms of how we identified what to move forward with. And when I say the working group, it was really the work of Sabina. She really did an awesome job going through and I don't know the right word, crunching all of that information and coming up with something to present to the working group for us to work with. You can see they're all over town, which it's a defining feature of Jericho. And you can see on some of them how they extend into other towns, which I think reinforces that idea that it's part of this network. And ecologically, they just function better when they're connected. And that is my lead in to, were there any questions on this before I get into the, yes. Yes.
Interesting that on the left it says forest habitat blocks, and the other one says forest blocks section numbers, but doesn't use the word habitat. This is just, there wasn't room for the word habitat. I asked that just, is there a distinction between a forest block and a forest habitat block?
There's no secret meaning in the words,
Okay.
Yeah.
thank you. Just making sure. I
Yeah.
understood.
but that's good. And if I remember, I'll go back.
See if you were paying attention.
I'm paying attention.
Yeah.
So,
on it.
good job.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about the numbers?
The
Yes,
numbers are purely
label.
labels.
Okay, so not
So
ranking.
you start at one is
Correct.
at the top
Okay.
and 35 is at the bottom. And so you started at the point of Jericho and you went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
Okay.
10, and all the way down.
I assumed it was a ranking.
Yes,
The ranking is not shown on this picture.
I
This
see.
is the labeling, the marking of each block.
And the ranking that Arrowwood is complicated because there's like 10 factors and they're ranked 10 times based on
Right.
different factors. There's one, I think, that does a composite of all of them, but that's what I was saying. It's complex in that sense. So I said these things work better. And if you think back to that Northeast region and how important these connections are, that works on a micro scale here in Jericho. So one of the things that we have also been looking at are the wildlife connections. It is not easy to see on the screen. So what I have for each of you in front of you, there are two maps. We currently have wildlife corridors.
Wildlife
Like-
crossing.
Crossings, sorry, yeah. So on this one, this image that has the pink on it, that should say existing wildlife crossings. That's how it is labeled in our current NRO, Natural Resource Overlay. The Arrows research came up with this other map that I showed you, that you have in front of you that has yellow, orange markings on it. And this is a much more refined map of where these wildlife connections, corridors are.
Right.
So
Yeah.
this,
And they're intrinsically tied to the blocks,
Correct,
the new stuff.
and this came directly from Arrowwood.
Correct.
correct.
Okay.
And can you walk us through the colors on the corridors, on the refined corridors?
They deal with percentage of use in terms of how intensely they are used. The yellow being the least, orange being the highest.
It goes red, orange, yellow.
And
So red and orange combined make up the top 2% of the corridors in terms of their functionality and their importance between the blocks. And then yellow is 3 to 5%.
Of the width.
Of the same, ranking.
But
Can I ask a question? When we say used by the wildlife,
Correct.
I have a question. This, when I look at this, they seem, as corridors, they seem on first glance to be sort of isolated.
Well, when
How
you
does that-
tie in the blocks, you'll see that they directly connect the forest blocks.
Okay.
which
Is
were the
that-
big green blobs on the
Right.
screen that
It
Krista
makes it
showed.
look like their travel is like incredibly small, like there's somebody going back and forth.
Well,
walking
sometimes
this-
it is that way. I mean, sometimes it's,
Right, but I'm trying to reconcile that with the map of the greater North American continent, the Northeast continent that showed broad strokes of movement.
I tried to make
Right.
this simple by just having the quarters on it, and that's probably not helpful because, for example, if you look in the upper part here, at the top of Silly Hill, right,
Mhm.
Silly Hill Road, there are two forest blocks on either side of Silly Hill Road. So all of the yellow and the connections that are on Silly Hill Road represent connections between the forest blocks, those two forest blocks that are on either side of the road, as an example.
So
Right.
if we were to overlay the forest blocks on this, anything that's not shades of yellow to red would presumably be a forest block.
They would be leading to a
Leading
forest
to it.
block, connecting to it.
Connection, getting deeper and deeper into the green as we get further away.
I see.
Right, like because the green blobs are interrupted by roads or
Right,
development or rivers or streams. They have to then, you sort of isolate, if there were no, it would just all be big
So
green
this is
blobs.
not thinking about just acres of woods. This is just thinking about relative to human development,
Most,
prioritizing.
well, because the blocks themselves were identified by Arrowwood as distinct entities. And then the corridors are the connections between those entities.
But if someone had a piece of property, just pick a big piece of land, a big lot, and they wanted to develop it and they looked at this, they would think, oh, there's no wildlife activity there, which clearly wouldn't be the case. I'm just trying to understand.
This map shows the wildlife connections in isolation.
Mhm.
I was showing it this way to make the point that right now,
They're big
what's
ones.
mapped is big and blobby,
Yes.
and what we have now is much more refined information. And I didn't put the other information on there that gives this more context,
Okay.
more to make the point that general and
Yes.
more specific.
Okay.
But it does make more sense when you put it all together, although it's a little harder to read. Yeah,
That's why it's a layered map, is because you got
Yeah.
to build it all to see the whole picture.
is everyone clear on? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that was actually a really helpful discussion because the point of this is that when we're looking at the forest blocks in terms of their ecological health, we really need to be looking at the animal connections, the wildlife connections too, because they work together as a system. So when we were looking at identifying the forest blocks, so they added to the NRO, the working group also looked at landing on the ground where we've got land uses. So we looked at both the regional future land use map, the town plans future land use map, and our zoning map. Within each of those, and they all line up neatly as we would want them to. Each of those have areas for growth, where we are targeting for residential development, and each of those have rural areas, and they do, pretty much line up. So whether it's we could get the all line up. So this really grounded the working group's assessment of the forest blocks into the present to figure out, what's present, what's current, what's planned. How does that inform our thinking about which forest blocks are most important? In two different ways.
Can I just add one thing to that?
Yeah.
So Chris actually framed this for me, which I found really helpful. So Arrowwood information is just basically the science. Like they're not thinking at all about policy. And so what what we had to do was sort of synthesize the science with the policy. And so that's what these layers were. And we identified the sources of the policies that we wanted to integrate into the discussion. Like what was the data? What were the previous decisions? Where would we look for our goals so that we weren't necessarily only looking at it just from a science point of view? Because just from a science point of view would be the whole town is a forest, basically.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Well, that was your instruction to me.
Well,
So
great. Okay. So this was Susan's idea. So I'll put you through. This was Susan's idea to come up with.
we're gonna do line dancing next. It's gonna be like calling a do-si-do.
What is this called again? It's like a
Like a stock screen, but like a filter.
Yeah. So this is the process that we went through to get to our prioritization at the end. So just to get to that. So we established a baseline. So we had the 35 forest blocks that came from Arrowwood, and then we also have our high elevation forest blocks that are already mapped. So that's sort of our baseline that we're working from. We pulled together a working group that, in addition to our working group that included the Conservation Commission, we also met with you're gonna have to, Jens, who's with the state, right?
Fish and Wildlife, yeah.
Fish and Wildlife. Arrowwood, our consultant from Arrowwood came part of this meeting, and we had staff from CCRP sit in on the meeting with us to help us think through what the priorities should be, what other towns do. It was really a great discussion. It really helped refine our thinking in terms of how do I think about which blocks are most at risk and which ones have really high integrity. So then we took that next level down and applying it to the land use map, what our plans were, what the regional plans were. And coming through all that, we identified 11 forest blocks that we thought were most at risk. And I'll talk through that in the next slide. And then 13 forest blocks that had the highest integrity. So those were how we came up with, we went from 35 down to 24. In terms of how that plays out, we're on slide 20. So this map shows the culmination of that distillation. The dark green shows the at-risk forest blocks. So those are the forest blocks that are in areas that we're targeting for development. So that's primarily that it's all low density residential and village district. And then the areas that had the highest integrity also aligned with where our existing forest district was. So we thought it made sense just to line that up. So there were 11 that were most risk and then 13 that were at the highest priority. And then you can see also on the map, the dotted green line, those are the existing high elevation forest blocks.
Chris, hold on. So highest integrity is the lighter green.
Correct.
At risk.
Is darker green.
Is integrity the same as highest priority, or is that different?
We're saying that both the ones at risk and
No, I think that
Oh,
we've
sorry.
been, Chris and I are wordsmithing in, so yes, for the purposes of this discussion, I think what Heidi is asking is where we have priority on that bullet
oh,
is where you have
yes.
integrity, so.
Let's say highest
Yeah,
integrity.
we didn't get all of our edits in.
Oh, that's fine. I just want to make sure that I'm following the logic.
Yep,
Mhm.
Okay.
you are.
Once again, you're also reading every word, so and catching these things. So thank you for that too. I'm gonna make a note to change that. So.
Categories, right? Because the ones that are at risk are also high value.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
highest, if that second bullet said 13 blocks identified as highest integrity, which was the Arrowwood ranking plus additional rankings that we had.
Okay.
The 11 plus the 13 are the highest priority and therefore are the ones that we are recommending be added to the NRO.
And their highest priority for two kind of opposite reasons.
Yes.
One is the highest integrity is like, they are the least interrupted. You've got a lot of continuity there, whereas the most at risk are the ones that are the most kind of at risk, the most interrupted, and if we're gonna preserve anything there, we gotta be real careful about it or
Well,
something.
yeah,
don't know.
the way Jens likes to explain this when he gives lectures on this is that, you know, you have your biggest forest blocks, and those are kind of easy to wrap your head around. They're, you know, giant swaths of uninterrupted forest, but then you have stepping stones between them. And so there are smaller versions of those large forest blocks. And so if you want to think of those dark green things as stepping stones, because they all function together to make a complete and healthy ecosystem. So if you start taking out the stepping stones, you can have the most fabulous forest in the world, but it's an island and it doesn't function the way it's supposed to. So because in our town, just because of time and the way our town has developed, what was mapped as these stepping stone forest blocks are the ones that are sort of paradoxically, you know, more important than you would think because they're connectors and because they're at risk.
Got it.
I
And
have
that I'm sorry, the high elevation,
Yeah,
can you tell me just? Is that just there for history or is
Yes.
high elevation a special thing?
no, it's there for history.
Okay,
It's what we had, so when we did the NRO, high elevation was the only thing that was mapped, and so it was the only data we could use.
okay.
And so now we've added data and we're bringing that in.
But the high elevation is also an important resource that we don't want to lose, because those are also the most visible. So being able to not have clear cut and sort of maintain that the green characteristics.
They aren't additional to.
It's not
21
additional,
priority.
right? It's within
Correct.
that, yeah.
Yeah,
I have a question.
Some of them would be,
but they're not new. They're already in the NRO.
correct.
Yeah,
But they are priority.
Yeah, they're secondary priority in that ranking of the NRO.
The biggest dark green blob, the second one up from the bottom, the big one towards the, the second one up. Isn't that mostly mobs? And isn't that preserved because it's mobs? Am I reading that?
Um,
One
In
that's
which
on
case
Lee
it's
River
not at
Road?
risk.
No, it's
Moss
on,
is to the left of that, it's the white,
So
The
is-
white-
The
to the
big
left.
white open space.
yeah,
So that's Fitzsimons?
yeah. Well,
I
and
don't think that's,
some of that might be mobs, but it's just the way it was drawn. I don't, we would have to go back to
I'm
the,
almost certain that's Fitzsimons that,
right, well,
because
so.
it's the white blob
One
that's
side
inside
is
is
mobs,
different.
and then the other side is white, it's also.
Right, but isn't the dark green mobs preserved? Or am I not? And if it's preserved, would it still be high risk? I don't understand.
Well, I don't think we
Oh.
can break it out,
It was the forest block
yeah,
that is in the low density residential area that we identified as the high risk. We included that entire forest block,
Right.
even though part of it extended out of it.
right? So we couldn't just like, it was impossible to break them up and like have, okay, this is excluded, this is in it,
Yes.
so we're just talking about the whole little
Okay.
stepping stone block. But you're right,
Okay,
it wouldn't be at risk because it's conserved
okay.
in mobs particularly.
Yeah, but
Okay.
that point also, I was saying how the highest integrity forest blocks line up with the forest district. That's generally true, but then there are parts of those forest blocks that bleed out a little bit
Right.
into the rural ag because it's part of the same
Right.
block.
Tom Barabo's here and he has his
Oh.
hand up, so I'm going to. Tom, can you unmute yourself or do you need me to?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, the question had to do with that second darker green polygon that sort of emanates just west of the Millbrook watershed. That whole area is part of what was called the Kettle or Kettle Creek, and it actually outlets near the northern part of Fitzsimons and feeds into Millbrook. So it's not part of mobs, but it abuts to part of the mobs part.
I
Yeah.
was just thinking through what it's.
Yeah, let's see that runs, yes.
So I was just orienting
Thank
people
you.
to that. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
thank you. You can stay unmuted if you want to. You're the only one here.
And you're part
Okay.
of the working
And
group,
you're,
so
yeah, you're,
not really participating as a member of the public. You're participating as a member of the working group, and thank you for coming.
So if I'm looking at this correctly, though, the largest contiguous block is that space right around Jericho Center, Jericho Corners, with bordering on Lee River and Packard Road. Is that the right spot there? The one that looks kind of like a lobster?
yeah, I see that.
I did too.
What's the question? Is that the biggest?
That's biggest and also potentially the most threatened, because that's where we're planning for development that's not going in Riverside.
I would say all of the forest blocks that are in the village or low density residential areas are threatened because that's where we're really targeting as development growth areas.
And so to remind us again, Chris Sheehan, what we're saying is if we put them in the NRO. So if we say, these are important protected resources we'd like to protect, and we're putting them in the NRO and they're in the village and low density residential districts, it will still be possible to use the land for building if someone goes through a special something.
Correct, because the NRO regulations don't say you can't build in a forest block. It just says if you're going to build in a forest block, you need to minimize tree loss, you need to try to keep it at the edges, you need to cluster. It's
Somebody were already owns that land, then their grandfather, obviously, or whatever. I mean, they've already done what they have done, but if they want to do something new, then they have to go through the process, the policy process. If somebody is selling their property, they're leaving, they're selling it to somebody new, would they be informed that they were in that special designation? I'm just thinking, like, what are the implications of saying, yes, I agree with this notion that certain forest blocks in an NRO should be put into the NRO that are not there right now? And what is the implication for building on your currently owned land or selling it and a new buyer coming in?
It would be no different than the existing resources that are already on the NRO map.
So you're adding new ones.
We're adding new resources to the map, but the process is the same as the existing resources.
Right,
I
but
don't
now
think, I don't think currently, I don't think Chris Flynn sends a letter to somebody who's buying property and tells them, you know, oh,
Right.
this is, has natural resources on it.
Right.
I don't think that, I'm not advocating either way for a policy, but I don't think that is
But
currently.
I'm just thinking, like, so just in terms of,
I think you would just have to do due diligence.
Right.
And understand. But, yeah, so we can talk about that more,
But-
but I don't think it's happening, right?
no, it's not now, but if somebody were to buy something, they were researching and they would be able to find out, like, oh, this is land that's been
Right.
put into, under this certain designation before they bought it.
Right, or all, any
But
of
you would
the
have the
zoning-
same thing on the flip side, like,
Yeah.
oh, I bought 8 acres when it was 3 acre zoning and now it's gonna be 1 acre zoning.
Yes.
So instead
Yeah.
of being able to
Yeah.
get 2 or 3 lots, now you could get
Yeah.
7 or
Yeah.
8.
That's fine.
So there's not general communications about all of these changes. It's just when they come and they search the land records and they look at the giant maps and they see, if anything, they might be like, wow, this is like a really valuable.
Right, oh, yeah. I'm fine with it.
Resource,
I just
yeah.
want to make sure that I understand.
There's not like any specific in communication about it,
Okay.
And I don't.
but
and I
the
think it-
data would be there,
And
so they could
is-
make an informed decision.
And there are other overlays as well. There's a wellhead overlay and there's a
Yeah.
river overlay, so all of those things could affect your property in some way, shape or form,
Right.
so.
And you would go through the same process. We're not changing the process.
Correct.
We're just changing the amount of properties that were. that-
Correct.
Right.
So,
Yeah, from
well,
a
and some
development
of these
perspective.
actually, if I can just say one thing, some of these have resources on them already.
Uh-huh.
So they're not necessarily becoming newly burdened, if
Mm-hmm.
you wanna look at it that way. They already are, some of them are already in the NRO because they, a lot of them have, streams that are protected and things like that, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We also found a lot of the parcels are already in current use,
Oh, that's
where
interesting.
the
Uh-huh.
property is already decided to be treated as either an ag property or forestry property for
Yeah,
tax purposes.
yeah, I was thinking more of
Yeah.
the ones that are in the low density and village.
Yeah.
So,
Eric and Chris, I know you both.
Yeah, I'm just in thinking about the ones that are in the village centers. You know, what is the implications that has for an area we've designated as a growth area? The requirements we've stated of having more affordable housing, meaning making it less expensive to develop. and yet putting in what is now a potential cost restriction on what you can do. We have them there, it's great. Now it's identified. What's the implication that has for a developer who wants to go in to the village centers where we've designated for growth and put in development?
What would make it more expensive? What do you think would make it more expensive?
Complying with regulations that we have. I don't know what we have
I mean,
in place by designating this as a forest block that should be preserved. I assume we're going to have restrictions on what you can and can't do in there. And what will those do? What will they mean? Because all of that area between Packard, Lee River, and Brown's Trace, and 15, that's all we're designating for growth. And that's that whole bunch of those real dark areas are right there.
Yeah, I think there might, if you were doing a development, there would probably be additional costs incurred during the planning phase to identify the resources and figure out where to go. But I would think the other side of that is it's going to cause you to cluster your development more, which means you're going to be having less expenses on building your infrastructure. And so I don't know how much more and how much you save. I don't know if it's a wash or what. But I think it can go both ways.
Want to add part of that lobster, it looks like a big area, part of that is the town forest.
I have a related but different question. So it's a little bit of a chicken or egg question, I think, but so there, a lot of those areas are high risk. Well, all the areas on this map that are high risk because they're within the low density or residential or village
They're in our growth,
district.
is it designated growth areas, yeah.
Right. So I guess my question is, how does that influence us going forward? And would it, if we were stepping back 100 years and we knew that this was coming, would we change the village, the development pattern? And since we can't step back 100 years and we're here today, how does this, or does it influence our development pattern going forward since we know this? Would we refine our development pattern based on
Would we change
this?
our zoning, in other words?
Well,
Eventually.
that might be the outcome of refining our zoning, our development pattern. But I guess my question is, what do we do with this beyond just adding it to the, does it cause us to rethink any of our development pattern? Or do you know what I'm asking?
Yes. Go back to this here. There are lots of forest blocks that we're not recommending be included.
No, yes, I understand
Yeah.
that overall it's a win, but my question is more, what do we do with the information? Is there anything more to be done with this new information? Does it influence us going forward? That's all. I guess that's sort of all I'm asking is, since we know this now and we didn't know it a month ago, does it influence us in any way? And maybe it doesn't, but maybe it's enough just to add it to the NRO. But
I think that's the approach we were taking, is that we have long established growth patterns that are codified in our town plan and codified in our zoning. And this is another resource to factor in. And we actually already have a framework for how to develop around them and work with them.
And I fully believe and endorse the development patterns, but I also would like to think that we would be open to sort of, changing our minds if new information came around that warranted it. I'm not saying this does, I'm just posing the question. I guess.
Yeah, so in my mind, what I've been thinking about with this is, I think we eliminated forest blocks that were in the village centers. And we eliminated, I think,
I don't think we eliminated number 20, which is the one above the. Yeah.
but the majority, okay,
Yeah,
but that was a
yes, yes,
screen. That was
right.
one of the things we did was.
No, that's 9.
Funny. Up, down.
Right there, right where you're.
The little one, yes,
The heart-shaped one.
the little
Oh,
heart-shaped
no.
one. But because of what you're saying, Eric, like, well, wait a minute, we've already established that these are gonna be, that's why there's not 35 blocks. And that was one of the things that would make a forest block fall by the wayside, basically. So that's, and we did the same thing in Village, where there are fewer, because if we have already established a policy that that's where the growth will occur. But we were reassured by the review of the PUD, which told us that the densities were the same. There were not reductions. It just changed the layout. And when we were thinking about the low density residential district, a lot of its characteristics now are sort of interspersed with open land. And that while more of it will get developed, especially with the new zoning, every single square inch of it does not need to be developed. And if we were going to be able to create a development pattern where most of the development happened as either away from these green, dark green blobs or within them, but respecting the resource, like not obliterating the resource. That's basically all the NRO says is don't destroy it, don't obliterate it. So instead of clearing 3 acres, clear half acre, because that is enough for a house. I don't know, there's no numbers in there. I'm just using that as an example.
No, I get what you're.
So when I think about the development pattern, like back to your question, then I go, okay, fast forward planning commission 3 months from now, I think it would be cool to be looking at the maps and looking at CHIP and saying, okay, now we've identified all these high value places. Let's find then where could we look at projects that could be well suited for CHIP, because you could do 10 houses there, you could do 20 houses there. But with the town as a participant, we can create those kinds of neighborhoods with small dwellings and the kinds of, townhouses and condos and the kinds of stuff that we want, instead of just letting all the development just happen to us. I think this can help us direct a pattern.
Is there a tool that would allow us, say someone came in with a proposal or the town was going to take on some big project, to say, this is the land, this is the lot, and it's in that, whatever, that heart-shaped blob or whichever number you want. Is there a way for someone to say, this would be the best way to develop that? Or don't do this? Or is there that level of granularity?
Well, we've looked at that here in our meetings. We looked at conservation design and the land use review board, I think. I'm not sure what the entity is, they're looking in the legislature now at Act 181 and whether or not they're going to delay implementation of like the road rule, and providing more guidance on conservation design is what we met with Jens about, because he was like, if you add it, you want to be able to provide standards so people know what they need to do. And so they gave us examples of standards, and that'll be that we haven't done that yet.
Because we couldn't expect the DRB to know, like, oh, this is a amphibian crossing.
The NRO does already say certain things to do and to not do. That would make your development respectfully, peacefully coexist and not obliterate the
Within any
resource.
particular.
Well, depending on the type of resource. So that was my only clarification on what you guys said earlier about high elevation, is that high elevation potentially might have its own standard because it has special conditions. So you'd look at like, right now, we have a few standards that are kind of related to forest, but not really. We have standards related to crossings and talus and these other things. So forests need their own instructions so that the developer or the applicant would know, if I do these 3 things, I'm good.
So for example, the current regulation, the current guideline for high elevation forest block is land development, including land preparation and clearing, shall be limited to retain forest cover and vegetation so that it functions as forest habitat and connectivity among adjacent protected natural resources is maintained. So it's land development in these areas shall comply with other regulations and be cited to minimize visual impact. So they're general that gives some direction to the applicant and the DRB to figure out what the best outcome is. It doesn't say you can't.
And the Conservation Commission generally, when there is development proposed on a parcel that is in the NRO, the Conservation Commission gets a letter from Chris Flynn, and then we generally weigh in to give that kind of advice or say, it would be recommended that you do an impact study, to make sure that you're not damaging resources that were, or a wetland delineation or something like that, if it's really questionable.
I want to make sure you have a chance because you haven't said much about this, I don't think.
Yeah, I've got two questions. The first is just a simple nuts and bolts clarity. When you're talking about doing the PUD review, and there's no change to density or number of units, you mean from like sketch or site plan to the actual PUD, what got developed? Like, what are you saying there wasn't a change from what to what?
That it wasn't like they wanted to do 18 lots, but because of the NRO, they could only do 12.
Okay, so comparing like before they went through the process, what they came with and then what they ended up with, you've got the same density and the same.
Right, and Sabina looked at decisions and conditions, and there were no examples where it's like, up the NRO, you can only do X.
Yeah.
You can't do Y.
Right, or that somebody walked away, well, that we know of,
Yeah, it's hard to measure something that isn't there. But that is kind of where it's like the best you could do is somebody coming with a plan and then being like, screw this and leaving, but you didn't see evidence of that.
No.
Okay. The other question is, how many of these new blocks are new, meaning they don't have any other protected or other overlay? Like how much are we really adding to the overlay? Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
Yes.
We looked at that.
Yeah.
That was one of the rankings, was whether or not it already has like a forested riparian area, which is already protected in the NRO. If it has a stream or a river, it's already protected by the river overlay. So there were some differences and some expansions, but there were very few examples where there was like nothing and now suddenly this is brand new.
So it's not a new category.
Constraint. No, the land itself already has a characteristic that makes it a natural resource. This is it's almost like it's almost like this, where it's like, we thought it was this, and now we know it's really this.
So I think that, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how much.
And I'm sorry,
No.
for your own knowledge base, if you go to the map viewer, you can turn on the different layers and you can see for yourself you can turn on the current NRO, and then you can turn on the forest blocks and see how they all overlap. I mean, it is a little bit of a mess, like today, but by next week,
Yeah.
it will be much more user-friendly again.
You've used the map viewer, you've used Jericho map viewer. So we worked with CCRPC to add forest block data from Arrowwood, so you can pull that up and look at it.
Because I don't know. It sounds like it's trivial, but I don't know that to be true. Getting to Eric's question, which is, what is the added burden, financial and time burden to going, to having to go through this NRO process. And if we're adding a lot of new land when almost, it seems like most of Jericho is already covered by some kind of NRO. I just want to understand that.
I don't think most of Jericho is already covered by an NRO. What I heard is many properties in Jericho have some kind of feature that requires it to be considered, but it's not technically an NRO that would come with all these other things.
It might be wellhead protection, it might be the river corridor.
Right, which
Yeah.
means that you have to go that.
Through a similar process.
So,
The NRO
So-
does not have it. So much.
exactly, so, and that's what I'm saying, are there any of these that don't have a vernal pool and that wouldn't be initiating the NRO, but we would now because of these forest blocks, because of these 24. And really what I'm asking about, and I realize it's the most at risk, and so we want to be thoughtful about it, but those areas where we're actually talking about really increasing density and allowing for growth.
It would be so much easier if we could just turn on the map, but I can
Yeah.
tell you just from,
The map viewer, we can try and pull it up.
you wanna try?
Well, I'm worried about the time.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
okay.
So, but were you just gonna go up and gesture?
No point.
Go ahead.
I was just.
Yeah. Through all this, I told Sabina, I was like, you would have been a great science teacher. Like, I wanted to be a middle school science teacher.
Did a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, this was a lot of work.
Oh, great, Wendy, because you hadn't been saying much either, so I was gonna ask you if you had anything to say, but there you have it, so.
Not while you're ahead.
There's game running somewhere along here, right? So all of these blocks have forested riparian, so that's in the NRO.
Yep.
And so it's kind of maybe on this side of the property, but it's in there. And the thing about the forest blocks is that's not all one property, right? So that could be many parcels that make up the block. So maybe the ones that already have the riparian, it's in the forest block, but it's not necessarily on the same parcel.
That's the same for the one between Lee River and Plains Road. That long thin one, yeah.
But yes, because it's the river, right?
Yeah.
It's already, so.
Yeah, and so what are the ones that aren't like that? What are the ones that don't have vernal pools, or don't have?
The lobster.
Or don't have?
What's in the
Which
lobster?
one's the lobster? I don't see the lobster. I feel like
But that's
it's,
not
what do
all
you call it?
Oh, it's the underneath the big green block, the biggest green block. It's. I think it's.
The little long
What is
skin.
nudity?
No, it's next to the.
So I'm gonna, let's see, because I don't know how.
Yeah.
Where and for.
But to the right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see, so this is,
I didn't see it.
Yeah, so
this
that's.
is 11, this is all those little green ones that I just pointed out,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And this is 9, the big one has a big stream coming through, that's town forest, that's town
So what's
forest.
in that middle bare area where you're?
This,
Yeah, well, like
That's-
this whole that's just white, that doesn't
that's
look like it
farms
has any.
and land.
Laser.
Forest
That's
cover.
That
Mm.
farm between or. the
Although when
farm
you're
stream is
nervous, which that's happened to be like in a presentation, you're like.
And there's a forest lot
Correct,
at risk, so that would be a new.
Correct.
To the NRO.
yes. So you can kind of.
Yeah.
Look at this and then shut your eyes, and then I'm gonna move ahead. To there. And you can kind of see where that is. Wendy, I was just kidding before. I mean, if you do have, okay,
This is great, thank you for checking.
Can I ask Chris, would you mind going back to just one slide again? Because now that we've had this conversation, it grounds it much better for me about your winnowing
Mhm,
process and the thinking that you did, because it was a lot to absorb.
mhm.
So if we go back to the thinking that you've already done, like you were saying, Wendy, like these are the ways that you've already thought about, oh, okay. How do we create some sense of priority that is not the entire of Jericho?
And thinking about what kinds of standards would enable development, but not destroy the block.
So I'm gonna,
Yeah,
I'm
thank you.
just, so the next step,
Please.
so tonight, what the working group is looking for is confirmation that, yes, we agree with your methodology for identifying the blocks to add, proceed. And then what we would come back at the next meeting is what those standards are. So I read to you what the existing standard is for high elevation forest block. We just want to look at that and make sure that's the right standard. There might be we want to look at it and just make sure that's the right standard. There might be something different we want to add. There might be something we want to take out. We just want to, that's a different discussion. Correct? Yeah.
Do you want to go back to your question?
Tom, do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Not at this point.
And Eric, did you have any other questions? You've been piping up, but I just want to make sure.
I'm not shy.
I know you're not.
At some point, I think it might be very beneficial to have conversations, and I'm happy to take a lead on this with actual developers and get their feedback on what does an NRO really do for the cost of their development.
When you did your developer interviews, didn't you get some feedback from them saying that at least one or two said they liked it because it helped them do the right thing?
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look at my notes and I can share those notes, but none of the people that I talked to thought that the natural resource overlay as it was an issue. Their issues were more with state regulations and state stormwater regulations and yeah. And they actually like having clear regulations that identify what the issues are so that they know what it is going, it makes their process easier.
Jens also said that he uses the Jericho NRO as an example for other towns.
Yeah, Jens did a whole presentation on natural resource overlays, and Jericho's was the top, like, we were like the last one because in his opinion, we were the best one. So, and he said one of the things that made us stand out was the way we tied the standards to the resources. And to him, that's what made it successful. So other towns have mapped standards, mapped resources, but they don't tie it to any kind of regulations or standards. And he felt like that was a flaw for some towns. Anyway, we're often recognized for the work that we've done on this in the past.
Yeah, I'm on board. I think you guys are doing great. Keep it up.
Great.
Looks good.
We're a little behind our schedule, but so what I'm hearing is yes, proceed. Looking forward to seeing what you come back with. Okay, great. Okay, cool. All right.
Italy for.
Here's our next discussion item. Continuing our discussion on PUDs. So I have had a lot of discussions with Chris Flynn. We've agreed on what we think is a good alternative, a way of looking at how to require what might require PUDs. So I'm going to kind of walk through what that is and hopefully get guidance from the Planning Commission tonight that this makes sense and to move forward with that. So I'm going to review what we previously talked about, and then I've got some new information to share with you that I've pulled together for the last 2 weeks. then walk through some site conditions that we might want to factor in as what would require a PUD. Then I'll get to the staff recommendations and then we can talk about it. All right, so for our review, some of the stuff is, I'm sure, fresh in our memories, but so right now the regulation requires PUDs for a major subdivision in the village, low density residential, rural ag, residential and forestry districts. We previously talked about the primary benefit we get from the PUDs is the protection of open space and how that clearly aligned with the purpose of at least the rural ag and the forestry district. There was a sort of a gray area or a discussion point for the low density residential because that talks about open space as well as potential for housing growth. So we wanted to follow up on that a little more. In terms of new information, I shared with the town attorney the proposal that we've been asked to look at in terms of going back to what had been in the regulations in 2000 up until 2022. Town attorney basically said like using specific standards to make it clear when a PUD is required is preferable and not using an unspecified a criteria like saying it's required when it furthers the objectives of the town plan. It's better to have something that's more specific and measurable instead of something that's not specified. Like it doesn't specify what the objectives are. And anyway, so that was the feedback from the town attorney. Did that make sense? Wendy, you were looking at me. I think your brow cleared up by the end of it. Okay. I would also add that the strongest benefits of the PUD, it's not just open space, but it's protection of natural resources. So I think that may be implied, but I wanted to specify that. And then going back to one of those things we established very early on as a goal was trying to rely on maps of identified resources that we have, particularly for conservation. Just wanted to circle back to that because I think we have a real opportunity in this approach I'm going to explain to really tie into some of those maps. So our PUD regulations already are very clear what needs to be protected in the open space requirement that's part of a PUD. So the things that are shown here on the left are things that are required. So if there's something on the map that's the wetlands overlay district, something on the river overlay district, the wellhead protection area district, and the natural resources district, those resources have to be in the open space. It's very clear about that. And then identifies other resources that their disturbance should be minimized. And there's a whole long list of those. Grade of up to 25, with slopes that are 25% or more, prominent hillsides, ridge lines, and significant rock outcroppings, prime agricultural soil. I think that's come up a lot in our discussions, and we never really figured out how to integrate into our regs. Then there are other things like historic and cultural resources, scenic resources, large habitat blocks, and existing trail or other pedestrian facilities.
Things that are required in a PUD. These aren't the things that trigger a PUD.
Yet.
Okay.
Right. So currently, when you look in the PUD regulations and it says you have to have so much open space, and if you have these things on your site, these have to be in your open space. Yeah, at least on the left. The ones on the right don't have to be in the open space, but you need to protect them and not obliterate them, right? Okay. Almost all of those things that are on those lists are mapped resources. Not all of them, but many of them are. These are just a couple. So all the overlay districts obviously are. Topography is mapped, so that would tell us where the 25% grade is. And then we've got maps of prime agricultural soil. Those are just some examples. If you remember, at a previous meeting, there was a slide that was nothing but maps on it. There was like 10 maps on it. So we've got all this information that's just, I don't want to say it's just sitting there, but like it's there for us to use if we want to. They're mapped through zoning, they're mapped to the town plan, or a lot of this is mapped through state agencies. So we've got this information.
Not to interrupt, but prime ag soils, when Chuck was here last time, we were talking about it. How many of those are actually still being used as agriculture? Do we have a percentage of it to create soil? Is it being used?
I don't know the answer to that. And it's also hard to answer that because the state of Vermont is going through a massive agricultural transition from dairy farming to something else.
Yeah.
And this is a pattern that's happened in this state ever since it's been a state, right? It went from sheep to hops to so.
You, Vermont expert.
Well, the fact that it's not being used for agricultural land now, I wouldn't say, well, it's not being used for agriculture, right? It's just we are in this transition phase now where we're trying to figure out what that next agricultural is going to be.
But whether it's being used or not, it's still, the soil itself could still be identified as prime for agriculture, whether it's being used or not.
Exactly. Yes.
It's just a
It's
site.
got a house and a garage and driveways on it.
Doesn't change the dirt.
Agriculture
Yes,
is
it does.
often also prime.
It doesn't.
Stuff.
Dirt's covered
Yes.
away.
Let's not go down some rabbit holes.
Yeah, I just.
Yep. These are all,
You're getting it.
yes. Okay. So what Chris Flynn and I have come together as an idea is that a PUD, a required PUD would be for a site that has three factors that all line up. So first, we would still use the major subdivision, which is 4 lots or more. We would still focus on the zoning districts where there's an open space component that we might want to have. And that would be low density, rural ag and forestry. And then add the presence of a site resource. And that site resource we could pull from that other page. So let's see what's mapped. Let's see what makes the most sense. Once you have, if you just have a major subdivision in one of those zoning districts and you don't have any resources, it's not a PUD. If you just have a major subdivision and it's not in one of those zoning districts, but you do have those resources, it's not a PUD.
So you need all three.
You need all three to line up. There is a open space component to that, so I was including it to the purpose of the district. Yeah. What it's good about this approach, what we think is good about this approach, is it's relying on mapped and identified resources, so it's an objective yes or no. It's predictable, so if you're a property owner or someone looking at a property, you can clearly see whether or not this lines up. And then it really clarifies the purpose for why you would want to do it, why you would need to do a PUD, because it's specifically associated with protecting a specific resource.
What's the relationship between site resources and the NRO?
Ask that again.
So is the presence of site resources, are those site resources
Oh.
identified as in the NRO?
Yes, so a site resource could be prime agricultural land. It could be what's mapped on the NRO. So it could be a riparian
Okay.
forested area.
That maybe not as, that's not defined yet, what a site resource is, or?
No, it's the list from the previous.
Okay, gotcha.
Which looks like everything.
This,
It's both, I mean, it does, it looks like the whole town.
Yeah, so this is an idea of an approach to take.
Yeah.
Yeah, whether it is all of these things or not, like I need to take a look with Chris and see what resources that we have. Like, I don't think we have a really good map of historical and cultural resource areas. I don't think we have a good map of scenic resources. But some of these things are mapped. We do have maps of like prime agricultural soils. We do know where prominent hillsides, ridgeslides, and significant rock outcroppings are. Those are things that, and they're actually on the in the map viewer as layers you can pull up.
It is narrowing the circumstances from the current circumstances that would trigger a PUD. Because it's eliminating the village district completely. Even if all those criteria are met, it's out. And it's adding to the current criteria of major subdivision. And what it's adding is the presence of these resources. So if you're doing a major subdivision and major subdivision in a field in the low density residential district and certain things aren't there, you're not required to do a PUD. You would still be encouraged to do a PUD. You could still earn a density bonus by doing a PUD. You would still earn different dimensional flexibility if you did a PUD. So we would hope that there would still be a lot of PUD development, because 2 or 3 meetings ago, we found that the PUD was actually working well, was effective. Developers liked it, they were using it. It wasn't really a constraint. It was effective at clustering and preserving open space, striking the balance.
We found that everybody was using PUDs because they had to, and before that, people weren't using PUDs.
I think we found that true, it was required. Before that, fewer, or not 100%, but that I think what Chris found was that they probably would have done the PUD anyway because they wanted the smaller lot sizes.
I just remember the data that Catherine Sonic presented at one of those previous meetings. It was a huge flip-flop in the pattern of development from standard to PUD. When is it appropriate to debate what we're protecting?
I think it'd be good to get that feedback now.
Do you mean for
Are you talking about on this list?
that.
Yeah. Is there anything on this list that you wouldn't include? I mean, there are things I wouldn't include, but I'm curious.
I guess, I don't know, I haven't thought about it before, so I don't know, but maybe like areas with slopes greater than 25%. Why is that something to protect? And again, maybe this is just my being naive because I'm not a developer, but if that might be a decision why I want to go with a PUD, but it doesn't seem like, I don't know why we would want to protect that. Oh, I can tell you. Yeah, please. Erosion. And so as my house before this house, and lived on where they had built on a slope greater than 25%, and my land kept eroding so that the house was at risk. Okay. And it also meant that anything that was below the land, because it was disturbed, got disturbed. So it, because of the tumbling. Okay.
How
So,
does the PUD prevent that?
I don't know. I'm just saying that would be a reason to care about slopes, is that it impacts the structure that you put on as well as what's underneath the slope if it starts eroding.
and I guess. Yeah, I guess that's slightly different, because I'm thinking, I absolutely, if I was building, would probably want to stay away from the things that 25% or greater slope, and so I may naturally go into the PUD, so why do we need to force it? And the reason we would force it is because it's a resource that we want to protect, and so I don't understand why a slope is a resource that we.
Erosion control, right?
Erosion control, yeah.
Which could be for roads, it could be for habitat, it could be for lots of things.
But is erosion control a zoning issue?
It's a land use issue.
Well, but, I mean, but the person doing the construction could account for all of that.
I think that's what it's saying though, Chris. I read this as it's a recommendation to minimize the disturbance. It's not saying you have to go to a PUD, it says. PUD design should
But
have
this
these
is the
included.
list that they're using to trigger a PUD.
This is the list. Yes, well,
PUD, you have to pay attention to it.
yes and no. yes, this is the list of things that are currently identified to protect in a PUD.
Right.
That we're saying,
That you're.
if we're going to require a PUD, let's pull it from a resource that we know we already want to protect. And these are what those resources are. Whether it is each one of these resources or some of these resources is a point to discuss.
Wait, now I lost you. So are you saying? Stu is using the language that if you have any of these things on the right-hand side, that triggers PUD. And what I was saying is, right, versus if you're already in a PUD process because of the items that are triggering a PUD anyway, which is in the left column, once you're involved, you have to also. pay
That's
Yeah.
how it currently is.
So right
What
now,
we're proposing.
sorry, right now, none of these automatically trigger a PUD,
None of them do. Okay.
right?
Correct.
When you are in a PUD, it says these are the things that you have to protect because we care about these things. So you have to protect these things, right?
Yes.
Go to your next slide.
The previous slide. I think,
This slide,
this one.
Presence of site resources is what they're recommending be one of the three things that triggers this new PUD trigger is presence of site resources. And that list of site resources is the list on the previous slide.
The one on the right-hand side.
So that's.
It's on both, it's the whole slide, the left and
Yeah.
the right.
Okay.
right? But it's not,
But-
it,
Go ahead.
those are what's currently identified, which we're saying, let's use these resources, a selection of these resources, all 1, 2, whatever,
Starting.
as a saying, okay, if you've got this, then you have to do a PUD.
So,
Right.
so I go.
And so
I get
your
side,
question was,
trying to think.
when do we debate which one of these are there? Yeah,
And you said now would be fine.
now would be a good time to
Right,
get that.
okay,
feedback.
so as
So I
they
started
raised
the
the
debate.
you're like, okay, 25% doesn't make sense, and then Eric said, how does a PUD help protect? Is that a resource? Is it a condition? Is it something to protect? And Eric was like, well, how would the PUD protect that? Right?
Mhm.
Okay, so are we all now on the same page? So we are in fact interested to hear of this set of resources or other ones potentially. Well, I guess maybe even, does it make sense to narrow when a PUD is required? Because until Chris Flynn came in here, that was not our intention per se, although SJ has brought it up before as potentially, it requires more planning, and is that really what we want? We reviewed PUDs. Okay, so the premise is that we agree that PUDs perhaps should be required less frequently than it is today. Does everybody agree with that? Is that true? Although Sabina just left and I kind of want to hear her answer too.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Right, because if we don't agree with that, then we wouldn't be working on this list.
I have been thinking about this in terms of zoning districts, so this is new and interesting concept, but I was definitely supportive of not requiring a PUD in the village district. And possibly low density.
Right.
So I guess to answer your question, then yes, I do agree that we should decrease the amount of area in the town that requires a PUD.
Mhm.
Specifically low density.
Well, specifically village, she said,
And maybe go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
and maybe low density. So,
And what this approach would line up is that there may be sites, depending on what the triggers are, even in rural ag, that could move forward just as a major subdivision. And they would have the option as a PUD if they didn't have a site resource that was identified as a trigger.
One of the intentions of the PUD, my understanding is that it is designed to limit random rampant development in any place. So you're now making sure that you know where the roads are, where the houses are going to be, how many will be built. And you can define it and make sure it stays in an area where you want development, to preserve the resources, to preserve other pieces, as opposed to, I've got 25 acres and I'm just gonna willy-nilly cut it up. PUD says, I've got 25 acres, here's what I'm gonna preserve, here's what's gonna be development, so on and so forth. And it requires the developer to think about the neighborhood in the long term, rather than just throw a couple of streets up and let it go. I think that's an important part of a PUD that we should want to preserve, rather than saying, throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I mean, I think that you can, I think that planning goes into major subdivision or standard subdivisions and PUDs. I think that there are a lot of big benefits to PUDs, and the big cost, which is a benefit to the town, and I get that, is setting aside 50% of the land that will never, ever, ever be available for development. And having to maintain it as common area and then creating covenants, like it's a whole thing. And requiring that, you end up with, and again, from a conservation, from a resource protection standpoint, yes, that's a big benefit. But from a housing and infill and, in some of these areas where if we wanna look at decreasing lot size, well, now, if you're in a PUD where that common land is, we can decrease lot size as much as we want, but we can't utilize that land anymore because it's been set aside forever. And so I think, shouldn't be everything. I don't think a PUD should be required for everything, because it comes with this huge permanent space requirement, open space.
And I don't want to lose track of part of that conversation that we had when we were looking at PUDs about decreasing the percentage in some of the zoning districts for open space.
Yes.
That was part of the conversation as
Yes,
well.
and that is thank you, I forgot about that.
If it went to 25% in the low density residential, would that change thinking on it?
I think it might for me.
Say that again?
I think it might for me.
In
I think if-
a good or bad?
I think I would be more inclined to say, yes, let's keep a PUD in a low density residential if the open space requirement is less.
And that would be the minimum.
25%.
Okay, that's just the minimum. You could choose to do more if you want.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, the forever piece is a heavy concept. And it makes me think of, like 100 years from now, we can't even imagine what the world will be like. And so it's impossible to imagine what the development of Jericho would want to be at that time. It's easy to think 5 years from now or 20 years from now, but forever is it's a big concept. So I do think, in that sense, I agree with SJ that we should give, careful consideration to that, because it does go on a really long time. But I think in low density residential, if we're going to have, if part of the concept of this zone is to have open space, then it would seem natural to have a PUD requirement and require some open space.
I'm sorry, and this, I should know this, it doesn't matter how many buildings, even if it's two.
Well, what they were suggesting is that it would be only for major subdivisions, which would be 4 lots or greater, not necessarily number of buildings at all.
That's what the
So-
DRB was,
Um,
you said they.
I meant Chris Shaheen and Chris Flynn.
Yeah.
Because I think we all sort of left that last discussion, like Wendy, you're saying, like, you left the last discussion thinking, yes, less places. I did too, but I felt like really stuck. And you're saying like, well, it's this permanent, I think of it as an allocation. So when I saw this list, I was like, okay, well, instead of just willy-nilly open space, like
Yeah.
I was sort of waxing poetic before about like you could have a playground or you could have this or you could have that, which I still don't want to give up.
Sure.
But at least I could kind of rationale like, okay, if we are going to allocate land on a permanent basis, why would we do that? Not just so that it looks like nice, not just so that when people are driving around in cars, they're like, oh, there's a field or oh, there's a this. It's like, no, the reason is because 100 years from now, these features, and maybe these aren't the right features, which are the features that 100 years from now, like Central Park, somebody would be driving around and going, man, that planning commission in 2026, they really did an amazing thing of protecting features of the land that are really integral to the nature of the community.
It's a
And
really
allow-
good standard, by the way.
Yeah. Have you met me?
Just saying.
Have you met me, Chris? Yes, but that's what I'm going, that's what I'm shooting for. So when I was like bummed, like, we're so stuck, we're so stuck, we're so stuck. And then I saw this and I was like, seeing like the light, sort of like, okay, well, we could work with this because I was thinking about SJ. It's like, well, this is like rationale, like this is a reason that's justifiable. It's something that DRB, I think applicants would accept that as like a reasonable design requirement. It doesn't feel arbitrary. It does, and it feels less arbitrary to me than the DRB having like discretion. That I was like, I can't handle that.
100%.
And so you were talking about the open space and an HOA and controls on that, and it as it just being like a big lawn area. I mean, that's how it was.
I was calling it a burden, yeah.
Well, it was more that I got the sense that it was being described as just like open space, and maybe it gets hayed.
Had no value.
It has value. It has no prospect for future development.
Well, I think that's right, that it in terms of housing.
Yeah.
But not as a working land or an agricultural use or forestry or whatever like that. And it is being set aside as open space, but we don't know what's going to happen with climate change. We don't know what's going to happen with migration pattern. We just don't know. And it is setting it aside to accommodate whatever those additional needs are. And yeah,
I'm trying.
and I didn't mean to call you out when I was saying you said this, but it was the point you were making, I think, was a good point, but
I'm trying to bet this is, again, like the low density residential, we're talking about needing to find places for infill. We're talking about trying to decrease lot sizes so that we can accommodate infill. And this would directly hinder those goals in low density residential and elsewhere. And so, or that's how I see the PUD as being in conflict with those goals. And so when I see this list, first of all, I'm dubious about the low density residential, and yes, maybe, and I'm a doobie. Yes, maybe the 25% kind of helps with that a little bit. But when I see this list, again, this is the whole town. So this doesn't actually, this isn't selecting just the best. And so that's, or just the things that we want to protect. And so that's where it's like, okay, well, let's dig into this. Like, do we even know what historic and cultural resource areas are in the town? Do we even, so should that be on the list? And if it is, we should damn well be sure that we have something that we can point to. So that's where I want to have conversation about it, because as it is now, that's everything. And I think that that is in conflict with our goals. But I 100% see the value of open space and the potential that it has for all sorts of things. But when it comes to enabling housing and infill,
I have a different perspective on that, SJ. I know that my house where I live in my neighborhood is in one of those, is in the dark green lobster that we saw the other day. And our development has, I think it's 25 acres that is into borders on the town forest. It's undevelopable. It's too steep. But because the builder was able to get that land and set it aside as a PUD, he was able to put in all the houses everywhere else.
Yeah.
So it actually increased the number of houses that would have,
yes.
that would have been there in
I
any
think
other
that- I
circumstance.
think that option would still be available. We wouldn't be mandating it across all of town. Your developer could be doing that and could be savvy enough to get a density bonus and whatever, because the developer recognizes that they've got this steep thing that isn't gonna be whatever, and so you can set it aside and get your bang for your buck. And no one's saying that you can't do that. And in fact, what we're saying, or what is somewhere in one of the slides, is that you're encouraged to think about doing that and encouraged to use a PUD. But where we're mandating it, I think needs to be specific.
And for good reason.
I see it as something that does accomplish, even when we mandate it, it still accomplishes resource conservation.
Yes, resource conservation, it accomplishes. It does not accomplish infill and housing. It can on certain lots, and then you would choose to do that, or you would be encouraged to do that. But now there's plenty of places where we would really like to encourage infill, and we're creating smaller lot sizes so that people can subdivide and do that. And they can't because it's common space that can never be developed. In addition to, septic and all things. But like, again, I'm not saying like do away with all the PUDs. All I'm saying is we have an opportunity to be really specific and intentional with when we mandate, and protecting what we want to protect and leaving the rest flexible.
Heidi, did you want to say something?
Right, I'm listening, as we know, maps are not my strength. So, but what I'm listening to SJ and I'm thinking about the concern, SJ, that you have, that it's everything, that it there means it's the whole town. And I'm having a hard time putting my head around that. Like, if I think about, are there areas of town where if you did have these as the required or things to think about, that would not be hit? We've already said it won't be, we've already taken it out some to say, right, just won't require. And the question is, are we going to put this in a broader swath or exempt certain other zoning districts from it? That's what I heard you say. Right?
Yeah.
Right, so we could conceivably say this is still the right. The framework is right to have the conditions. Right, the idea that you have to have all three things need to be met. And have that in addition to in certain zoning areas, but in other zoning areas, no PUD.
Yep.
Right, and which is what you're.
Optional.
Well, and that's what
That's
they're
what the second
proposing, right?
condition is.
Yeah.
Sabina,
Yeah.
Would you and Chris Flynn consider allowing this to go in the direction of different resources in different zones? So could the LDR have its own set of resources, and the rural ag and forestry would have a well, maybe the same, but maybe different. To call out the difference of the LDR as a special case.
So they would be
And-
triggering a PUD in in different circumstances.
Just be that number
List of
3,
short.
the resources would be a different list.
It goes back to the purpose of the district,
Right.
you're tying what might
Right,
be
right.
triggered to the purpose.
And then are we talking primarily about LDR? Is there,
I mean, that's what I was just saying was about LDR.
yeah, I mean,
I still wanna understand the list of site resources and what they are,
but if we had a list of site resources and it hit every property in the forestry district, would that be okay?
Which is no different than how it is now, because currently it's
Yeah.
major subdivision, forestry district, period, end of story.
And if we had a list of resources, but you say that again.
I think that defeats the. No, I don't like that.
You don't like assuming that every property in the forestry district would be required to have a PUD. You think there are some properties in the forestry district that would not need a
I
PUD?
like the spirit of the staff recommendation.
So what I'm trying to get at is the second line. 'Cause we've been,
I'm sorry, what I just heard was for the forestry district, it's just 1 and 2.
no, I was saying if we came up with a list of criteria and it just so happened that every property in the forestry district was captured by that. What I'm hearing is that it's the LDR. Like this is what I want to get confirmation on. If every property in the RAR and forestry got flagged using all of these, if we came up with a list of triggers and every property in the RAR and forestry district somehow got caught, that
Don't be triggered if there was a major subdivision. There's still
Correct.
2 other.
correct, if we had these criteria, the 3 criteria that we're talking about, and if everything in the RAR and the forestry just happened to capture everything, that would make sense. But it's the low density residential that's the snag. Like if we had a list of criteria and it caught every property in the low density residential district,
Yeah, I think I'd fight you on that.
yeah. Do you see what I'm asking?
I do, and I mean.
Don't like how the question's
I
being
don't like
framed?
The question, but you're right, yes.
Yeah.
I feel like I wanna fight you, but yes.
Yeah, like-
I mean, that's.
Well, so then
It's just because you're asking.
Susan, can you ask the question?
it seems reasonable that even in the low density residential district, that some open space is tolerable at the worst case and desirable in the best case. If it is based on resources that should be permanently protected in open space. And I do want to remind us that open space can be used for community septic, can be used for a lot of things. So is it really down to figuring out like where the buy-in is on the resources to protect? Right?
And really understanding where those are on the map.
Right. Kind of like your question with the blobs, like, is this trivial? I don't think the blobs were a trivial change, but I also didn't think they were a dramatic
The word
change.
trivial was specifically about the added financial and time burden.
Oh, I thought it
That's
was
what
about
I was-
how much trivial land.
Okay,
So forget that word.
saying, well, like, it's a wash and you don't know, and it's like, well, I don't.
I thought you meant the
I actually
quantity
think
of
that there
land.
is Something we don't know there.
So it seems like items on the left are fairly straightforward because they're already protected. The PUD would give you more design guidance on how to lay out your development. I think if we are adding forest resources to the NRO can the PUD open space is required to include areas within the NRO, but it can't be all the areas of the NRO. So that
Right.
has to change. Okay, so wetlands makes sense, river makes sense, wellhead, yes, NRO needs to be tweaked. Did you follow my tweak? Okay, so now the ones on the right, if we just look at those, are there so SJ said, I don't agree with slopes of 25% being the trigger
No,
for a PUD.
kind of a cultural resource.
Right, so maybe, and Chris said, we don't have those items mapped. So,
Well, I think the key part is where it says designs must minimize. It doesn't say you.
I know, but
have-
that unfortunately, maybe, that is it's currently in the PUD, so Chris and Chris are saying, should it now also be one of the triggers that makes a PUD required? You would still have to follow this instruction, but if you
That's
have
what
it,
I was trying to
yeah,
say,
so
is
that was
just
what
that-
was
is that
confusing.
I don't think anything on the right-hand side should trigger a PUD. That was my point.
Got it.
Okay,
I think it could be considered if a PUD was already triggered, sure.
right,
But I don't see anything that's on the right-hand side as a reason to trigger a PUD. I was playing the
Okay.
opposite side.
I would
I'll
say-
take your pair of jacks and I'll raise you. Okay. Maybe, however, I would say large habitat blocks, we're already mapping them in the NRO, that feels
Yeah, that's
redundant.
already- yeah.
So that, I don't know why that would be. Ag soils though, because we just had this conversation about it, once it's gone, and yes, it's prime for development, but not saying that it has to be in the open space or you could never develop, but that to me seems like something that should trigger a PUD, is the presence of prime ag soil. And I also think the presence of trails or pedestrian facilities should trigger a PUD, because otherwise we're gonna get screwed and we're gonna have all these little neighborhoods, and we have some development happens and it meets some town goals, and we've had lots of development happen that does not meet town goals, that are big houses in isolated neighborhoods that are not connected to other neighborhoods. And so I would hesitate to give those up as triggers.
So I just wanna, so you've got a parcel that you're gonna chop up and develop. And 2% of that parcel happens to have
Something.
a bit of a river on it or something. Now you gotta set aside 50% of that.
Well, Chris was saying LDR would be potentially 25%.
25%. So you might have a sliver of one of these things, and now you automatically have to set aside
Well-
half or a quarter of that.
Now you have to do that.
You have,
We could change that.
I just wanna underscore that like, it's not like the river is running through your property, and so it makes a lot of sense, and that it's, oh, this tiny corner of my parcel doesn't, now I gotta lop off
Yeah, there's no order of
a
magnitude.
huge chunk of it.
It's a yes or no, yeah. Of the resources that are on the right side, the only thing I think we have now that's mapped that we really consider are the first three.
Why wouldn't existing trails be that?
I don't know. The only trails map I think we have are trails that are on town property. I don't think we have a trails map.
There is a map that the Trails Committee put out, but it was never made official. And it was never distributed.
An official map?
At 8:55, let's talk about the value of an official map.
But
Sabine,
that's a
you-
different,
wait,
No, I
You
don't
have
have the
more.
answer. I don't know if I have the answer to the question, but, so there are trail maps, but they are in trails and parks and stuff like that. The bicycle, pedestrian and connectivity committee just went through the process of looking at sort of, unofficial trails. And so they have gathered that information. I don't know that they've put it on a map. So that's out there pending. And then we have the bike ped study that we're about to redo, which has suggested places for trails and networks and things like that. But that's not what this is saying. So but it does have the maps of what we already have. It has, all the sidewalks and things. So, I don't know if that moved the conversation forward, but that's
Yeah.
what I know.
So maybe the data source isn't good enough. But I wish we had the data that we could use and that would trigger it.
we would need like, I think for that one to be effective, we would need to have like a trail master plan that was like had the weight of an official map, that like we had a network that we wanted to realize, and you need to do the PUD so that we can have this trail. But we just don't have, as a town, we don't have that as a
It
resource.
would be great to have.
Yes,
Would it be possible to have as something that would trigger a PUD? Something that would be on a future official map?
Aspirational.
And that's, yeah, when we don't have one now, we're not gonna have one when we, move our recommendations to the select board, but we will have one.
I would want to add that when that map got adopted.
Could you put just like a little pending in parentheses at the end?
Like a winking emoji or something.
That'd be perfect.
I'm just saying, it's the placeholder and
Yeah.
it's the intention. And again, nothing we're gonna do is gonna be exactly and perfect. And while we're talking about forever, we should, I think we need to include the aspirational pieces. And we also have to recognize in 15 years, someone else is gonna come back and they potentially change it. So things that have historically been required to remain in open space may or may not need to be. So
Well, no, I mean,
wants to shoot me.
no, I don't wanna shoot you, I love you, I mean, current open space, like, there's no changing with how current open space is used. Like 15 years from now, 100 years from now, that's the whole point. You mean what?
You can change how you would use open
Okay,
space.
you wouldn't be able to
Isn't
develop
it
on a.
to leaving something like existing trails, which isn't, we have maps, so it's not like it's a completely unmapped resource.
Yeah.
Are they the best maps? Maybe
Right.
not, but they're getting better. So leaving it in there in its current form is maybe a little bit,
Update type.
like,
Mhm.
it's not perfect, but it's not hurting anything.
Well, from a regulatory standpoint, anything that we say this is going to trigger a PUD should be mapped and incorporated in zoning.
To be quantifiable.
Right,
Yes,
but
should exist.
to that whole thing, like the question of what's triggering and what's part of the PUD design plan.
Yeah.
Or
Mhm.
regulations, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
that's parsing that out a little bit, right? Because right now, that's in the, not in the triggering column. The way it stands right now, right?
Correct.
There's nothing in the trigger.
Yeah.
The only thing that
So,
triggers now
I'm
is
saying
major
leave it
subdivision,
in the, don't touch this if you're doing a PUD.
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
but don't
But
have
don't-
net, yes, okay.
Yeah, it could still be, you should minimize disturbance of these. Yeah, we're not talking about changing that. We're talking about, oh, this is a good clarification. So we're talking about in that section where it says applicability, there's a section of the regs that say applicability. It says if you have one of these factors, you have to do a PUD. And right now it's everything in these other zones and we're saying, okay, in that section, we would add these other criteria. Yeah. But this would still stay in the open space section of the PUD. Yeah.
Next time we talk about this, you gotta have a different slide.
Mhm.
Why? Because this has too much on it.
No, because
Well,
it's
it was
so
a little
big,
confusing.
it's confusing about.
The intentionality.
Yep,
Okay, we can work.
we can workshop it. I think, yes, I think
This was a
I
really good discussion. we
Yes.
had. Helpful
Yeah.
discussion.
Mhm. Yep.
I can't wait for a discussion that you don't. I want to hear you someday be like, this.
This was the
biggest
worst
waste of
discussion
time."
ever. It's 9 o'clock.
Okay, so we're gonna move on. So we're gonna be done
Great.
with this, okay? I think we got enough
Good
feedback
direction.
to come
Yeah.
back with a refined proposal from Chris and Chris.
Yeah.
Did we all say though, which I wanted to,
Oh,
which is just the love the intentionality around then the creative thinking of the three, like having the three factors.
Great,
mhm.
great. That's the feedback that's actually the feedback that we wanted to get.
Yeah.
To know whether green light or red light, and it's a green light. It's a yellow light, but it's more green than yellow.
Yeah.
Got it, yeah,
Good direction,
thank you.
needs more work.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is every meeting. Okay, any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on.
Just real quick, so I'm working with CCRPC, we're very close on working on the Riverside Village development scenarios. A meeting with the Affordable Housing Committee next week. Anyway, this is just what's coming up next week, and then our wastewater open space outreach strategy, not open space outreach strategy, is posted on our website now. So
Awesome.
yay.
And you were there today with Chuck and got the message about the housing, not bearing the lead of housing.
Oh, yeah, that was really helpful.
Yeah.
So we had a table for waste at the voting site, and Chuck was saying that housing is so critical to why we want to do wastewater, and it's just not rising to the fore and all the information we have about wastewater, and that we need to really reinforce that.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. That was really good feedback.
Okay, any other updates that anybody wants to share? No?
I advanced the slide.
Okay, well, it's late. Okay, I know, we would have been exhausted. Other business, okay, so we had talked briefly, I think at the end of our last meeting about, because it was late and now it's late again, and other meetings are starting at 6:30. If the planning commission would consider starting our meetings at 6:30.
Do we still end them at 9?
I think we would hopefully end them at 8:30. If people would let us know if that would or would not work for you, if you would let Chris know. And then when we adopt our rules of procedure at our next meeting, that would be incorporated into them if everybody agreed with that. And I guess could
So
you make
still
sure the
stay-
room would be available?
It should be, yeah.
Mhm.
So still stay for 7 for our next meeting and change it at that meeting? Or do we want to change to 6:30
We'd
for
have
our
to
next
vote
meeting?
for it, right?
Yeah, we're all here. Yeah,
Wait, we don't need to warn for that. do
No, we could change it. Are you ready to change it?
I'm good.
we? I'm good.
I'm good.
I'd like to
So-
make a motion to, oh, I'm sorry, Sabina, do you want to do it?
You motion away, babe.
Sorry, Sabina. I just want to get out of here. Yeah, I want to make a motion to move the planning commission meetings to Thursday at 6.
No, Tuesday.
Tuesday at 6:30.
Okay, 6:30 to 8:30. Okay, so our next meeting will start at
Great.
6:30.
Wait, do we have to vote?
Oh, yeah, all those in favor. I just assumed.
Okay.
Okay, SJ made the motion. Wendy seconded. All those in favor, please say yes. Yes. Any abstains? Any noes? Okay. So our next meeting will be March 17th. We'll do organizing. We'll continue along. Was there anything else for the 17th? I'll be on Zoom.
No, I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Motions.
Heidi,
Second.
Sabina, all those in favor of adjourn, please say yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.